the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David chats with legendary guitarist Andy Timmons. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got the next part of my interview with guitarist Andy Timmons. Andy's musical exploits are legendary, and he's considered by many to be one of the greatest guitarists of his generation. Bursting onto the scene with Danger, Danger, he went on to have a stellar solo career, and he's shown no sign of slowing down. Here after the break to chat more about his life, career, and the unbelievable Beatles story behind his brand new single, I'm in Love, is none other than guitarist Andy Timmons. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, when you first walk into the studio with the guys in Danger, Danger for the first time, and you're working on the debut album, what was your kind of first impression of that first session? Is there like an interesting or special memory or story that's kind of stayed with you all these years later?
When I joined the band, they had done the record with a session guy, a friend of theirs named Tony Bruno. The original guy, Al Petrelli, had parted ways when they got signed, didn't do the record. Tony, but then they started looking for the permanent guitar player. But very fortunately for me, they were going in to remix some of the record, and then brought me into at least be on the record. So I'm on Saturday Night and another song called Boys Will Be Boys. So my memory of that is that I was sitting next to Mike Stone, the legendary Mike Stone, who recorded not only the huge Whitesnake record, but the Queen records. And, there's the guy sitting there next to Brian May doing the Bohemian Rhapsody solo. Mm-hmm. But he's just being brought into mix. He's not there to record a guitar player. I remember him not being thrilled about that. But at the same time, it's like we had a couple songs to do. They brought me in, and I had my Kramer Sustainer guitar, which was my endorsement at the time, and had rented probably a Bradshaw rig from Andy Brower, and we got a tone up. First take, pretty much kind of nailed it. And I just look over at Mike Stone again. I'm nervous as heck, because you got to understand, at that point, that was my life's goal happening. I was in a recording studio in Los Angeles. This is a major label. Lenny Pizzi is the A&R guy. Lance Quinn is producing. These are huge names. Lenny signed Boston, and Cyndi Lauper and Lenny Pizzi had done so many great records, Talking Heads, all these different people. But here I'm gonna be on a record. That was the memory. So I play the solo, and it's just kind of quiet in the room. I look over at Mike Stone. I go, "How was that?" He goes, "Was that okay?" Was that okay? He goes, "Yeah, mate. Everybody gets it on the first take." But really dry, and I wasn't really sure how to take it. But I know now that he was being extremely sarcastic, and you know what I mean? It's like, I'm sure there were many iconic solos he was part of recording that probably took a while, let's just say. Anyway, but so that was the beginning of that time. And then, by the time we did the second record was called Screw It. And then we went to Hilversum. We went to Visselord Studios in Holland. And that record was an amazing experience, really, really good sounding record. An engineer named Erwin Musper produced with us. And it was just a really great combination. It was Steve Weston and Bruno Ravel were the main songwriters. That's the bass player and drummer, which is a little unusual. So the lead guitar player and Ted Poley, the vocalist, the front man, we weren't the prime songwriters, but kind of the face of the band in some ways. But Ted, and still to this day, has what is astoundingly uniquely his own sound. There were so many singers that you can go, you can point to, he's just doing, Sam Cooke, or he's just doing, Eddie Vedder. You remember after, when Eddie Vedder and the guys hit the scene, like everybody started singing like Eddie Vedder. You know what I mean?
I have a joke that every band is called Stone Temple of the Dog Jam.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm forgetting.
It's just one sound. Stone Temple of the Dog Jam.
Eating the sandwich bowls. I love Pearl Jam, by the way. Not knocking it. But that's the level of it, originality that he inspired. But Ted's just got his own sound, and I think that's why when Bruno and Steve heard him, he was actually drumming in a band called Prophet, and they heard him singing one song one night. Said, "My gosh, that guy's got a voice. Let's get him." And that's how that all happened. So. But yeah,
Well,
very, very fond memories indeed.
and screw it. I mean, there's so much great guitar work on that album.
Oh man, thank you.
I mean,
Thank you so much.
speaking of which, I mean, what of your contributions to that record would you say you're probably most proud of? I mean, is there a song off of Screw It that you
Yeah.
think maybe wouldn't work and then grew on you? Is there one that
Oh,
you knew from the beginning was just going to be the
yeah.
big one?
I think, well, yes, the big one. There's a song called "Slip to the Big
Yeah,
One," isn't there?
slip through the big
Yeah,
one.
exactly. That was very Extreme influence. We had done a tour with Extreme after the first record. We did a co-headline bill with them because it was before More Than Words had hit. So we were out kind of flopping each night who was going to headline, and but loved Nuno, loved the band, and so that was kind of our nod to the extreme funky metal. I love Beat the Bullet, and I think that one resonated. Just that I co-wrote that with Steve and Bruno. It's got a nice melody line in the lead guitar, which I wanted, which was very influenced by one of the Cult songs. Um, Maybe She Sells Sanctuary. I can't remember there was just some cool like where the melody stayed the same, just a repetitive riff and the chords changed. I don't know. I said, man, I would love to do something like that. And that's a nice solo on that one. I thought that I still think about you as a pretty nice solo. It's a great pop tune, just the good arena rock that was kind of starting to wane out at that point. I think the Danger just happened a little later than it would have been better if they gotten out a couple years earlier or whatever. But we rode the wave for as long as we could. It was a blast.
And there's so many more stops we could make on your time with Danger, but you
Yeah, that's
mentioned
okay.
earlier another part of your biography, which is equally as interesting as your time with Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you remember the first time you met her? What sticks out in your memory about that all these years later, maybe?
Yeah, it's I got to know her very well and we were very close. It's just the spirit that I recognized as soon as I was, in a conversation with her was just immediately gracious and kind and empathetic, and you felt very comfortable. I feel that with a lot of Australians in general. There's just a certain coolness and wit and a little irreverence, but a seriousness as well. Now, she just was an extremely kind, gracious person, and what the way it happened was I kind of got the gig without an audition. It was just it was actually a recommendation from Simon Phillips to Fitzgerald Hartley. So Toto was managed by the same management team that managed Olivia. So there was a guitar player that couldn't do this tour that was going to come from Australia. So she brought an Australian band with her, actually the backing band for a guy named John Farnham, who's he's like the Springsteen of Australia. It was his band with Olivia, but it was a guy named Brett Garzett, who's an incredible guitar player. Couldn't do it because he had a different gig he had to do. And so management just put the feelers out. Hey, who knows somebody that can do this gig? So I get a call on my machine from some, and do you fancy working with Olivia? And so I learned all the material, and we had 2 days of rehearsal before Olivia even got there. We had 2 days with the band in Las Vegas. It went great. Third day, she comes in, she comes right over to me before saying hello to anybody, just makes a beeline right to me, introduces herself. I'm like, this is amazing. This is so great. She's so sweet, so kind. Instantly feel very comfortable. Well, my wife had come with me who dressed up as Sandy, meaning like you dressed up as Ace. My wife dressed up like Olivia as Sandy in the movie Grease when she was a little girl. Well, she's on stage because we were kind of on the break. She's behind me talking to one of the singers. And Olivia goes, "Oh, that's your wife." So I tap Monica on the shoulder and she turns around and there's Olivia. And she just has this look on her face that I don't think I've seen since I proposed to her. But so they start conversing, and then Monica just starts tearing up. And Olivia says, "Oh, did I say something wrong?" I says, "No." And she had to explain. I'm sure I saw Olivia handle many situations, not just in that with fans, but things that were tough, maybe socially, but she just handled everything with a huge amount of dignity, and I learned a lot from her.
And you've said in the past that she was an artist whom truly had an aura about her.
Yeah, yeah, she did. Well, I said that I've used that word aura about Steve Vai, though she had her own spirit that's uniquely hers. But I've used the word with Steve Vai because I remember the first time I met him was in 1988. This is pre-Danger. I just recorded that track I talked about. It's Getting Better. He was on the road with David Lee Roth on the maybe the Skyscraper record, the second one that had Damn Good Times on it. So I think it must have been then. So this is 1988. And he comes to the recording studio where I'd recorded it because he had to do an edit for the radio, and they'd hired the studio, and very hush hush, but they told me, hey, Steve Vai's going to be here. You should come down. Oh yeah, great. So once he's done with the work he needed to do in the studio B, they brought him into studio A because every studio goes, hey, here's our studio. Check out our great studio. And they put my track on because it had just been recorded there, and they were real proud of the sound of it. So there's Steve Vai at the console, and he's looking up at me going, this is you? But he really did. He had kind of not only is a very personable, likable, friendly cat, but he just has got this kind of thing about him. It's a very spiritual aura, whatever that may be. I don't know.
Is he the one who talked about what you do with your feet when you're really in the zone
Yeah,
playing
I
guitar?
don't know where that came. Yeah, when my leg starts going, it looks like I'm stamping out a cigarette. I've seen other musicians do that, so I don't think that's uniquely mine. I think, but yeah, he made a real funny when my Resolution record came out. He couldn't be there for the debut concert, but he sent a video. He said, "Be sure and watch Andy. When he gets that leg going, something special is about to happen." That's when I dig deep. Yeah. And sure enough, and I hadn't seen the video until before the show, and I see it. So sure enough, the third song of the set's a song called "Ghost of You," and my leg starts doing it, and I totally mess up because I'm like, because it made me think about.
Because
I got
then
in
you
my
became
head,
self-conscious.
Steve Vai. I tell you. Yeah, he's a kooky, zany cat who happens to be, just the most incredible virtuoso ever.
So you subsequently went on to have a fantastic solo career, but I'd love to know how your most recent recording, I'm in Love, ranks on your list of personal favorites. I mean, reading the story behind the song's provenance almost feels kind of like an archaeological dig. How did you first discover the song and its story?
Well, so there was quite a few songs that Lennon and McCartney wrote in that early period when they'd just been taken on by Brian Epstein, and they finally get signed to a Parlophone in the UK. And they were still doing cover songs, and they're writing a lot of their own material, which actually quite unusual at that time. Buddy Holly and the Crickets were one of the few groups that were doing that. Usually, you get songs from professional songwriters, but they were writing their oin tunes. And then Brian Epstein had a stable of other acts that he was managing, people like The Foremost, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Cilla Black. I mean, some really great artists. And so when they had a tune that they weren't going to do with the Beatles, or didn't maybe think it was quite up to what they would like to do, they would hand it off to these other artists. And so the song "I'm in Love," which is credited to Lennon and McCartney, was done by a band called The Foremost. And I was aware of the song. It wasn't a particular favorite, but what moved the needle for me was that at some point, I was later told it had been leaked as a bootleg in the 2000s, but it might have been officially debuted when they were doing something called the Lost Lennon tapes. And there was an ongoing syndicated radio broadcast that would play these rare demos of John's and unreleased whatevers. And so I think that song got originally played and then bootlegged. And it was just John at a piano singing and playing, the song "I'm in Love" when it was 1963. And when I heard that demo, I thought, my gosh, how far off the mark the released version was by The Foremost, which George Martin produced. But it was just kind of polite, but John's vocal was very soulful and guttural, and it reminded me of like "All I've Got to Do" or "Not a Second Time," even "I Want to Hold Your Hand," all written in that same period. It just kind of had that feel about it. I said, "Oh my gosh, one day I'm going to record that song." I would love to do a version of that I thought maybe went closer to what could have happened had the Beatles done it. Now, there's been a lot of people that have covered "I'm in Love," but they've all kind of mirrored the arrangement that The Foremost did. So, I mean, for me to go back, I love the way you call it, like an archaeological dig. And some of the people that have heard it that know the song as well as I do have remarked that it felt like that to them too. Like, wow, it's finally getting a presentation that's maybe fitting of the song. Now, I'm calling it a Lennon song because it just sounds like maybe it was just John on his own, because there was a lot of demos that have surfaced from that time, like "Bad to Me," and other songs where it's John and Paul in the room singing and playing because they've worked on it. But this was John on his own, just kind of just doing a run through of it. And so then fast forward to, April of this year, and this friend of mine, Craig Hopkins, he's a local guy I see a lot of concerts. He's a big Beatles collector. I would say high-end Beatles collector. He's got an incredible, like, museum quality collection of Beatles stuff. And we saw each other at a Ringo show. He says, "Look, I'm going back to the UK for a kind of a Beatles trip in next year. This was in 2023. Do you want to go?" I was like, "Man, this would be great," because I'd never done like a proper let's go Beatles sightseeing. I've been to London a bunch. I'd been by Abbey Road. I'd done certain things, but he was going to go there for 3 days and then to Liverpool, and I'd never ever been to Liverpool, crazily enough, in all my travels. So great. And oh yeah, we're gonna, I'm gonna, I think we'll be able to book a day at Abbey Road. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is talk about bucket list or dream, come true. So turns out we were able to secure a date at Abbey Road, and he plays a bit of guitar and piano and wanted to record some things for himself. But he said you could just have the rest of the day. And a third buddy of ours, Dennis Poggenberg, joined us also, and he plays some great guitar. So I had to choose, okay, how am I going to use my time at Abbey Road? Once I get over the awe of being in Studio 2, this iconic room where so much of that music, was recorded. It's probably 80% of the Beatles' music was recorded in that room. And it looks the same as it did. They haven't really changed much over the years, except in the control room, which has got much more modern recording capabilities, though they still have a lot of the old outboard gear. So I did a solo piece that was called Truth, and that was just electric guitar, my kind of delayed, wet guitar sound in that room. That turned out nice. But for the version of I'm in Love, I had them provide they had an old Ludwig drum set and a bass rig. Daniel Steinhardt, my friend from the Pedal Show, brought his 61 Vox AC30. And as you can see in the video, I'm playing my 65 Strat. And along with that, when the engineer was conversing with me via email before the session, he said, "Well, what sounds are you going for?" I said, "Well, think Beatles 64, around that era." And they still have all the original microphones,
Oh, wow.
kept in pristine condition. So he had all the original microphones that they would have sung in, played in, used. Even the two Fairchild 660 limiters were in the control room for the drum overhead and for the bass, just like they would have used. So to say it was just the most Beatley experience I could have had, it was just incredible. And
Well,
so
I saw
yeah,
the video, and as soon as I
yeah.
saw it, my son who had the the mop top from until he was like
Oh,
13,
nice,
he
nice.
had the
Yeah.
bowl cut till he was like 13.
Okay.
He and I was like, you got to see this. Like, and he's
Oh,
like, and he knew because I mean, we talked about him before the show.
yeah.
He knew about the other recording of it.
Oh, he
And
did. Wow.
and then when he saw this, he was like, yeah, this is much more
Wow.
representative. And then
Wow.
and
That's
then came
cool.
and then came the we were talking a little bit about it, and that brought about a selfish question that I wanted to ask, which
Yeah.
is, was it because there was nothing available? I mean, if you're going to do it, why not a Hofner, Rickenbacker, or
Fair
Epiphone? Or is
enough.
it because of the sponsorship things you have, or because
Oh,
they just
no.
didn't have them? There's selfishly, there's a part of me, it's like, opportunity. I wish there was a, you know what I mean?
No, I thought about it. So let me explain why I chose what I did. The bass I ended up doing with my Fender Fender P bass because it's my best sounding bass. Um, the guitar sound I was going for, now the Rickenbacker would have been obvious. I have a 66 Rickenbacker 12 string. This it has nothing to do with the endorsement. Of course, I'm playing a vintage Strat, and I have an
Yeah.
Ibanez signature guitar, so clearly that wasn't the issue. I was going for the Nowhere Man guitar sound, which is John and George playing their matching Sonic Blue Strats, early 60 Strats, into the same Vox AC30, then with the treble cranked up and then cranked up even more. So that when you hear the solo, that real chimey thing, that's kind of what I've got in mind. And that's why I wanted the hook of the song to be that kind of chimey guitar tone. Then you see me in the studio. That's my 63 J160E. That part had to be recorded back in Dallas because I didn't have my J160 there. They had a couple of acoustics at the studio, but they weren't quite the sound that I wanted. And then the Ludwigs, I have an older set of Ludwigs than what they had in the studio. And I had already done the entire demo here at my studio. And then what I did was take the multi-track over there and then replace each part as I had the time to do so in the studio. So that's how it was all kind of thrown together. But yeah, there could have been some more obvious pastiche, but there's been so much done in those ways that I thought I'm just going to avoid certain things and do it. And then when the little heavier guitar comes in, that takes it to a little later era as well. But I had to get a little bit of that in there, and I think it's pretty effective the way we did it. But I totally hear you, and trust me, all those thoughts were in my mind, and
It
I
was
just
just,
had
it
to go
was
down.
selfishly. It was selfishly
No, no,
on
not
my.
at all. I totally get it, but I had to go down my path, and that's just the way it worked, you know.
What having been there, having been in the studio, having been through being in the business, what do you think truly gave the Beatles their magic? Was it just the right mix of talented guys at the right time and the right producer in George Morton, or
Mm.
was it much more than that?
I think there's just so many magical things on so many levels, and there's just example after example, and throughout their entire career, up until now and then, the most recent single. There's so many things that line up in such a miraculous way that it's like, how did this even happen? You know, had John not met Paul, had they not gotten Brian Epstein, had George Martin not seen the potential, all of these things, you know, and Abbey Road is very much a part of it. Listen to how different the band sounds at the BBC as opposed to Abbey Road. Great band, great songs, but that studio is another member of the band. There's no doubt about it.
Even when you
George,
look at Get Back and how they tried to do it in one place and then they found
yeah,
themselves back at
yeah.
the studio and eventually on top of the studio, but still.
That thank God for Peter Jackson doing what he did, yeah, to jump around, because when it came down to it, when they got on that roof and they start playing, and then half the record, it seems like so many of those versions from the rooftop is what's the recorded version. Something clicked with those guys. They was like, yeah, this is it. You can see John and Paul looking at each other with this look that's just like, yeah, man, we still got it. They had a really good day. You know what I mean? But you can only, and nobody will ever know. But the pressure that they were under, and just the personal lives were getting complicated. And so, but what Peter Jackson afforded us was the relief of going, you know what? Yeah, it was a really tough time for them, but the narrative that was presented in the original edit of the Let It Be film was completely shot to pieces with what he was able to dig out, and all the glorious fun moments and loving moments and heartbreaking moments. There was so much beauty that happened in that same 30 days that we never got to see until Peter Jackson. So that was a godsend for, I think, for Paul and Ringo too. They said, yeah, we believe what everybody else believed. That we were having a horrible time. We hated each other. But then you see the film and you go, no, they're still a great band. They're just having a really deeply stressful time. And how could they not, with that kind of pressure? Brian Epstein had died a couple of years earlier, and they were spinning, man. And Paul, it's clear that Paul kept it together the best he could. He did the best he could, you know. But
And the
they
film I think, takes a little heat off of Yoko there, and because you
huge,
realize that George
yeah.
was at the point where he had his fill, right? So
Well, there's so many factors, but yeah, George had, I mean, got you should try to, compete with John and Paul, and Paul being very much a directing force, it was hard not to take it personally and not to have it be stifling in some ways. So you could see where they all just kind of needed a break.
so to kind of wrap up a little,
Yeah.
what else can our audience be on the lookout for
Hmm.
from you? What's next on
Sure.
tap, Andy?
So I'm just about finished with my follow-up. My last record was Electric Truth that Josh Smith, a great guitar player, produced for me. And this one we're co-producing. It's going to come out in January. There'll be a single later this month, in late August, early September, the first single from that record, called Love is Greater Than Hate. And oh yeah, there'll be another solo record of solo pieces like the Truth track that I recorded at Abbey Road. And I've been getting lots of requests. I should do a whole record of, because if the people don't know, I played all the instruments on that Lennon song. So
Mhm.
people would like me to do a whole record of that kind of stuff. And I write a lot of kind of beatly pop tunes myself. So maybe that'll happen this next year too.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Where can our audience follow you on various social media platforms?
Well, the easiest thing is andytimmons.com, and then of course on all the Facebook and social, Instagram, Twitter. It's usually just called Andy Timmons Official. It's pretty easy to find the real one, hopefully. But that's the best way to keep, tabs on new single releases. That's where most people saw my I'm in Love single. That or YouTube. So come find me, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And please stay in touch. And David, I really appreciate you you clearly have done your homework, and I've had a great time with you, man. I hope you've had a good
Well,
time.
Andy, I thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man. Likewise.
Ladies
Anytime.
and gentlemen, Andy Timmons.
Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to Andy Timmons for joining us once again. Stay safe, everyone.